Hey, if you're pregnant over 40, I have just the community for you. It's a private community away from Facebook where women just like you come together to meet and support one another during pregnancy. To sign up for the waitlist, go to over40fabulousandpregnant.com/waitlist and be the first to know when the membership is open. I can't wait to see you inside. Welcome to Over 40, Fabulous and Pregnant. I am your host, Jamie Massey, and you're listening to episode 63. If you are looking for pregnancy stories of women over 40, today you've come to the right place. Today on the show, we have Tara on to share her pregnancy journey at 42. Tara is a single mother by choice, and she brings so much empowerment to this episode. She talks about being worried about not being seen by an OB for a few weeks after she graduated from her fertility clinic. And I totally get that. As IVF patients, we are seen so often that in the scheme of the OB appointments, we're not seen as much. And so I'm kind of already feeling that. I also love how at least 10 people helped her with injections. Now, I really laugh at this because I've had zero help. My husband said he would do the first injection and the rest were up to me. And that's really to help me get over my fear of needles. Now, I've done every single one since. Then, after hearing how Tara's family helped her, I asked my mom and sister to help me when they were here last week, and they both refused. So I hear all of Tara's cute stories of everyone helping her, and I just laugh. And before I forget, we did have some technical difficulties during the recording because she recorded this while she was in the Bahamas. So I took quite a bit of time to fix them. So hopefully you won't be able to find them. I have added a few outtakes at the end of the show. I think they're kind of fun. This week, I am 9 weeks pregnant. This Thursday, December 14th, I have my final ultrasound with a fertility clinic. It was actually because of this episode that I scheduled a tour with the birthing center. And even though I haven't had my last appointment yet, I'm already agreeing with Tara that the handoff from the fertility clinic to prenatal care could be a little bit smoother. I haven't had any warnings of what I should be doing or transitioning, so I'm already feeling that also. Honestly, I have been having a really hard time believing this is real. I almost cried when we were at the birthing center. Now, I cried and laughed on the way home because my thought was, everyone at the birthing center believes I'm actually going to give birth. Isn't that funny? That was my real thought. It was a wild thought. I do realize that. And I've spoken to quite a few of you that feel this also, and it's just so refreshing to know that I'm not alone with these thoughts. I feel like I'm so good at trying to conceive, but then pregnancy, I'm having to deal with new circumstances and thoughts. It's almost the same thoughts. So even sometimes going back and looking at my thoughts that I was practicing believing is even helping me during pregnancy. It's kind of interesting. these conversations are just a reminder that I need to open the community. Like, we just need it. And honestly, I have been telling myself I don't have enough time to figure it out, but I just haven't made the time. Having these conversations just made me realize how important it is that we have more connections with other women. It's my goal to have this community ready and open before the end of the year. Like, write that down. I've been saying that for too long. So you can connect with other women over 40 who are trying to conceive and pregnant. That is my promise. Oh my gosh. Yes, that is my promise. And with that, I also want to go hard on creating Trying to Conceive series. I don't have the list in front of me, but I have a few episodes ready and posts coming on Trying to Conceive. Next week's episode, I'm going to be talking about money in Trying to Conceive by request. So if you have a show you want to recommend, please let me know by email, website, or DM me on Instagram. There are a few of you who comment about the show right after you listen to it on Mondays, and I just love and appreciate the feedback. So thank you. And with that, let's get on with Tara's pregnancy at 42. Tara, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jamie. It's great to be here.
Thank you for coming on. And she is sharing her story at 42. But before we get started, will you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Jamie. Yep, 42, coming up on 43 next month. I am half English, half American, so my accent will probably go a little bit all over the place while we are chatting. I don't strongly feel from either of those countries because I was actually born in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, grew up mostly in Hong Kong. My parents still live there a chunk of the time, and have lived in 10 countries. Right now I live in New York City. New York is really my chosen home. I have been there for over a decade now.
And she's recording from the Bahamas.
Yes, I missed that part. My parents winter in the Bahamas. This is a COVID phenomenon for them that I am a very grateful beneficiary of.
Yes, I would love that too. So she is a single mother by choice. Tell us how that all got started.
You know, I would say it actually started decades ago. 12, 13 years ago. And that was when I decided to freeze my eggs. I would have been about 30 when I started thinking about it, about 32 when I actually went ahead and did it. And, you know, I think I was one of the typical, these days, city women focused on career, dating a lot, but no one serious, lots of dating, lots of couple months with someone, not anything that serious. I had actually ended a serious relationship when I was about 30 years old with someone I was with for 5 years. And that question of children was just ever present for me. Not a question of, I'm sure when's it going to happen, but more the actual question of, is that what I want? And freezing my eggs was actually a way of putting the decision off for a while, easing my mind somewhat of thinking, I'm getting older. By the way, a lot of that was the narrative of 35 being this kind of conceptual cutoff, that it seemed to be the narrative certainly a decade ago, that 35 was some magic moment, which I think is actually quite wrong. And we know much better about that now. Mm-hmm. But I had that number in my head, which really was what was making me think about, I should do something to, I guess, buy some time. So freezing my eggs really took the weight off of my mind and made me stop obsessing about it for quite a long time.
Yeah, that's brilliant. How many eggs did you end up freezing?
Well, I was very fortunate, and I think I got about 30 eggs.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
it is. Yeah, it was a lot. They retrieved more than that. And then of course there's, well, not of course, but anyone that's gone through IVF or going through IVF will understand why I said of course. There is just a almost a funnel of, you start with a certain number retrieved, and then you start to drop as you go through how many of those are mature and how many of those froze. And when you start to get into IVF, the numbers continue to come
Hmm.
down. So I think they actually retrieved more, and then about 28 were actually frozen.
Wow. That's impressive. So
I guess
fast.
I can't take any credit for it. I'm just lucky.
Yeah. So fast forward, I guess in your 40s, is that when you considered all this?
It is. It is. It was when I turned 40. And again, it's funny, isn't it? These ages are really just a construct that we use. Like, what is the difference between 39 and 41? Not so much difference.
Yep.
And yet, it is a milestone. It's a moment in time when you step back and reflect.
Hmm.
I think birthdays, the round number of birthdays are often like that. And for me, the reflection at the age of 40 was quite different from the reflection at the age of 30. And it was very much about, okay, if I want to have a child, I need to decide to do that pretty soon. And I really wanted that decision to be a conscious one, whether it was to have a child or not to have a child. I didn't want it to be made for me simply through my own inaction. I didn't want to suddenly get to a point, let's say the reflections at age 50, where that's not an option anymore. And although, by the way, I think it actually could still be an option even for people at 50. But I wanted to be very conscious and mindful in it, so that if the decision was not to, I would have made that decision and then stopped thinking about it, and then go on my life on that path. So yes, 40 was when I really sat with myself and decided to try.
Hmm. So when you spoke to the doctor, did you want to go straight into your frozen eggs, or did they want to try IUIs?
Great question. Neither of those things, actually.
What?
It was a really interesting dialogue. I still haven't used my frozen eggs. And I also didn't do IUI. So because I had had so many eggs retrieved when I was 32, and then they tested my AMH levels. I think it's AMH. Yeah,
Hmm.
you're nodding. I guess people, I shouldn't say I'm nodding when you're listening, but yes, AMH levels for those that are new to or embarking on the IVF cycle. It's a hormone that they use to give some indication of, I suppose, egg reserve and how many eggs you might get in a retrieval. And my numbers were very, very high, even at the age of 40. So that combined with how many eggs I got when I was 32, the doctor said, look, we think that you've got a pretty good chance, if you did another retrieval now, of again getting a good number of eggs. If we did that, you could keep your eggs frozen that you have frozen. And that way, say in 5 years' time, you want to have a second child. And at that point, you may have far fewer of your own eggs to be able to do that. I mean, that may then become a much bigger hurdle for you. You'd have those frozen eggs to use.
Hmm.
And if we can get you a baby without having to touch those frozen eggs, you can keep them as a continued option for future.
Uh-huh.
So that was what we did. And we went ahead and did a retrieval, and I went straight to IVF, no IUI. So we went ahead, did a retrieval. I, again, got a very good number of eggs, slightly fewer, maybe 26 this time. And
Only 26.
I know I've got the exact number somewhere, and I think I've posted about them, but it was a lot again.
Hmm.
And I became pregnant with one of those eggs. Although I will say, where you did see my age start to play through was in the chromosome, the abnormal incidence in the eggs. So of those 26-ish, I can't remember exactly, but of about that many eggs, I actually only ended up with 2 normal embryos.
Wow. Now, why didn't they want to start off with IUI?
It's a good question. And I'm trying to think back on what the thought process there was. I think part of it was simply to do with the nature of my insurance coverage allowing me to go directly to IVF rather than IUI. I think for some people, it's simply a requirement. You have to do a certain number of IUIs before insurance will cover you with IVF. So I didn't have that requirement with my insurance. That's great. And then it was really just a question of what did we think the likelihood was? Did I want to go through that? We knew IVF was a much more high probability outcome from one IVF process than from doing IUIs. And especially at my age, and now knowing like of those 26 eggs, only 2 of them resulted in a normal embryo, the chance of an IUI being successful was just a lot lower than if I went through IVF. And of course, if you do multiple IUIs, maybe right. It will work. And there's ways that you can help that process along with hormones and do some stimulation to get some more eggs released. I know there's plenty you can do. Really, I guess it was about time. Going straight to IVF saved me time.
What was the process like for you selecting a sperm donor?
It was very fun. It felt like a combination of online dating meets IKEA catalog shopping.
I love that.
Because you get so much information.
Yeah.
I mean, I know so much about this anonymous man, way more than you would ever know about a person that you are going on dates with. I have his extensive medical history of both sides of his family, going back to grandparents, even a genetic screening to check for anything that might be not compatible if I was a carrier for anything. You have his GPA. He writes an essay. He records 20 minutes of audio. So you get so much information. And in some ways, that's actually overwhelming, right? Yeah. How do you navigate all of that? So in some ways, for lack of having a better way to narrow down the numbers, I started with a quantitative screening of sorts. So there are some criteria that you can enter into the databases, and I'll actually come back to the databases in a moment. Or I could start there. Should I start with what the databases are and how you even find them?
Yeah.
So at least in the US, and this is different in different countries, and the legal frameworks are also, and regulatory frameworks are different in different countries. But for anyone who's looking in the US, or in fact, I think you could be someone outside of the US, but looking to buy sperm from a bank in the US, they're called cryobanks. There are 3 that are the big national banks in the US. One is called Fairfax, one is called California Cryo, and one is called the Seattle Cryobank. And there are others as well that are much smaller. One of the reasons I went with the bigger ones, I signed up in the end with both Fairfax and California Cryo, is they have a larger number to select from. But the numbers were still smaller than I expected them to be. Each of them had between 300 and 400 donors total in their system.
Wow.
I guess I don't know what I expected or what other people would expect, but I was expecting thousands at least. Yeah. It just seemed like a really small number that was what I was choosing between. But at the same time, how do you choose one out of 400? So I started with a quantitative screening, and that was entering in some basic stuff like skin color, hair color, eye color. And I just chose those things to be describing myself. I just picked the things that were like me, I guess with the idea that then the baby will look more like me. Not because I necessarily care that much about that. Like if I had a partner that did, the chances of me having a partner that looks like me is probably quite low. So it was almost more just for lack of any better reason, let's try and narrow down this data set somewhat. So that was what I did. And initially I was putting in a height criteria as well. It's like, well, why not? Let's pick someone tall. So I think initially 6 foot, there weren't so many in the database. So I had to relax the height criteria. I think I ended up saying 5'10" and applying the physical characteristics, and the 5'10" got me to about 20 donors.
Wow. So
then 20 that I went through in much more detail. Then I had 20 that I had a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. And each donor had an entry in the spreadsheet, and I had a whole bunch of columns for recording key things about them that were relevant to me, and then a notes field where I would put my reflections. And I shortlisted of those 20, probably about 8 that were my top 8. And then the spreadsheet got shared with my family, with my parents and with my brother, for them to also input and check out the profiles. And they had columns to tell me what they thought. I did make it very clear that they had input and not veto or decision.
Good for you.
Meaning that if there was someone that they really liked and I eliminated, sorry, don't get too attached. But also that they might not like a profile and that might be the one I choose. So again, sorry, don't get too attached. But I still found it super, super helpful getting their input. And I would say at the end of the day, it was actually the audio recordings that were the final tip on narrowing down from, say, my top 3.
Okay. What about in those audios was important to you?
Part of it is it's just hearing someone's voice. I think that you just can feel an affinity for someone based on how their voice sounds. So part of it, there were some that were eliminated just on, I just don't like the sound of their voice, which almost, again, this sounds so superficial, right? Like that's not going to be genetic. I highly doubt it would be. It's much more about just how you feel and wanting to just feel really good and positive about whoever it is you pick. But then, of course, it was about what they said. And they are all asked the same questions. And they are all asked, why did you choose to be a sperm donor? And the profile that I ended up choosing, I really liked his answer because it was so refreshingly honest. He literally said, I would be lying if I didn't say money was a factor. I needed some cash. Yep. He said he needed some cash. And this felt like a real win-win. He could help someone and he could help himself at the same time. So why not? And they do recruit, by the way, on college campuses. Many of the donors he was about 20 years old when he donated. So many of the donators, and actually, by the way, I don't know why they say donated. It was not a freebie. So yeah, he did get paid. And many of them are 20-year-olds on college campuses and they need some cash. So the reason I just appreciated that honesty was I had listened to a lot of answers that felt to me disingenuous about how they were doing this for purely altruistic purposes out of the kindness of their hearts. And who knows, maybe some of them actually were, but I found it really hard to believe. And I really appreciated that there was someone who was willing to actually say, hey, look, I mean, yeah, they pay us to do this. The other answer that I really liked, so he was unusually designated as what they call a known anonymous donor. So meaning he can be identified at a certain point in the child's life. I think it's when she turns 18, she can find out his identity if she chooses to, if the child chooses to. Sorry, I'm saying she about my baby. That's a really interesting decision. Most of them are completely anonymous and do not offer that ability to be known at some future date. And that actually isn't why I chose him, not because of that ability to be known. But his answer indicated a degree of empathy that I found really appealing. So they asked him why he chose to be a known anonymous donor. And he said, look, I've just been thinking to myself, what would it be like if I was this child? And I would want to know who my dad is. And it doesn't seem fair of me to deprive the child of that knowledge that is possible for them to have. So that's why I decided. And I just really appreciated that. And I think that answer to me captures overall the vibe I got, which was that he was a kind person, a good-hearted person. And this is not something that is heritable. I hope that my baby is a kind person because I teach her to be a kind person and she learns it from her upbringing. But I really like that I can tell her that I think we would like her dad. And I think he's a good person. I should be careful with the language of dad, by the way. I'm supposed to say donor. He's not her dad, he's her donor. I'm going to have to think about that language and the storytelling around it as she gets older.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even same with me using donor eggs. It's the same
Yeah.
language. We need to be conscious of that. Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've chosen this donor and you have your 26 eggs and we get 2 embryos.
Yeah. So most of that drop came to do with the chromosomal abnormalities. So from that 26 or so, not all of them fertilized. I think maybe about 21 fertilized. And then of those 21, 14 made it to day 5 blastocysts. Is it worth explaining this language at all, or should I assume that the listeners are generally somewhat familiar with the stages?
I think we're pretty familiar, I would say.
Okay. So 14 made it to day 5, and then we're frozen. So I opted to send the 14 for testing, for the chromosome testing. I know not everyone chooses to do that, but for me, a big consideration was my age and the likelihood that quite a few of them would be abnormal. I think if you're younger, I can understand why the decision might be a little bit different there. And there is a cost to it, and that cost was not covered by my insurance. So it is an outlay, and you get charged by how many you're testing. So having 14 to test actually was a lot to send off for testing. I think I actually got some kind of bulk discount in the end. They were like, oh, well, we won't charge you more than this. So,
wow.
Okay. I know, right? So I had felt really optimistic throughout up until this point in the process. I mean, things were going great.
Yeah.
Super duper. They got so many eggs and fertilized and 14 sent for testing. Yay. And I remember the moment when I got the phone call for them to tell me the results. And they said only 2 were normal and the other 12 were not compatible with life. And yes, 2 is amazing. I had 2, but it was still a shock.
Yeah.
It was a shock to lose 12. Mm-hmm. That was just a big number. And it made me feel suddenly a lot less sure. Like, okay, I've got 2 chances. Should I do an egg retrieval again? Should I go to embryo transfer stage? They like you to have 3 before you move to the embryo transfer stage. So I wasn't sure what to do at that point. My brother was very helpful in this. He's very good at numbers and very good at stats. And I was like, okay, if I give you the probabilities, they have told me that the probability of success for a normal embryo when transferred is about 60%, between 60 and 70%. So if I have 2 tries at this, what does that mean my probability of success is? Because I'm like, I don't know how to do probabilities. I know I can't add them up. What do I do with them? And so he's like, this is what you do. You have to multiply them. Your chances, I think it was 88 or 90%. I can't remember. It's something like that. And if you have 3, it gets to close to 99%, which is, I think, why they ask you, they recommend having 3. So I was like, okay, 90-ish%. It's pretty good. Let's go forward with 2 and see what happens. Mm-hmm. So that was what I decided to do at that point. I really didn't want to do another egg retrieval if I could avoid it.
They're tough and stressful.
They're really tough. I'm really lucky that I've only done 2 in my life and very far apart. They are really tough. Yeah.
So we have transfer 1. How was it?
The transfer itself, it's so easy. I think maybe because you've gone through the egg retrieval, you kind of somehow are expecting it to be more than it is. It's like, pop, off you go. Oh, okay. So by the way, I had to choose which of the 2 to put in.
Oh,
that was,
did you know the sex?
I asked to know, and they did. So they did share it with me. I had 1 male and 1 female.
Ooh.
So how did I choose? And I asked them, if I don't choose one, how will you choose? Because they had basically said there was not a meaningful difference between them as far as
quality.
Quality, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they said, well, the lab tech will choose. I was like, well, if someone's going to choose, I'll choose rather than the lab tech. Yeah. But I guess maybe not everyone will think that, because of course I'm sort of thinking through, if I choose one and then it doesn't work, will the other one be like, why did you not choose me first? And I'm immediately fast forwarding through these scenarios, probably too much. So I chose the girl. I would say a lot of that is to do with, as a single mother, I figured I would choose the sex that I had the greatest familiarity with, so that if I ended up only having one child, I would have the best chance of being able to share her experience and relate and just know what's happening down there.
Mm-hmm.
That was the basis really on which I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to choose, let's go girl first. But it was successful. And that 2 week moment, I actually held off. I know how hard it is during that 2 week wait to not test. I know a lot of people are watching the lines on the pregnancy tests, and it can become quite challenging, I think, actually psychologically, to be watching that, knowing that the trigger shot might be influencing the hormones. Like, are you misreading it? There's so much to read into these things. And I managed to hold off. I just kept myself busy. I went about my life as normal and sat down and took the test the day before I went in for the blood test. I
Oh my
decided that what I
gosh.
wanted to do, I decided that was like the last moment that I could do the test for myself. And I wanted to have some preparation for the blood test so that it didn't catch me by surprise when they called me if it wasn't positive. So I tested the night before and I sat there on the toilet and was totally shocked when it was positive.
Really?
I really had, maybe this was just like my way of preparing myself psychologically, but I had really managed my expectations down to the point of not expecting it to be positive. And so when it was positive, it was just like, whoa, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Now what? And then, of course, you do the blood test, and the blood test actually gives you the data of what the levels of your HCG, is that what it is, of
Yeah.
the levels of the HCG? And mine were a very solid level, so not a level to kind of raise any concerns. It was just where they would want it to be, and that continued to track well on the next test. They saw a good increase. So yeah, everything then progressed.
And how was your pregnancy?
I actually had a great pregnancy. I was very fortunate again in that regard. I will say the nausea in the first, for me, it was the first probably 9 weeks. So it wasn't exactly nausea for me as it was uncontrollable belching, which really attractive, which for me was it's my way of managing the nausea. It's like, I guess it's like I felt constantly a little bit of unease in my stomach. And the reason I say belch is this was more than a burp. Like, this was a real kind of sound. And that was the only thing that would make me feel better. And I did it constantly. Like, I'd be on work calls and I would just have to do it. I would just tell everyone, I'm really sorry, I've got an upset stomach. Oh, so that was kind of funny. My younger brother came to visit right around that point. In fact, I was still taking my progesterone shot. So as part of IVF for the first 9 weeks or so, you're still doing those delightful progesterone and oil shots in the butt.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fun, and especially fun to do them to yourself.
Oh, yeah.
So I did have to do many of them to myself, but I found it so much easier if someone would do it for me. And I reckon as many as 10 different people injected my butt for me.
Wow, how nice.
I know. I called in the community, and literally this was everyone from my gay best friends, Gunkle and fairy godfather, to my baby, nearly in the delivery room with me. I guess we'll come to that. He wasn't in the end, but he would have been. He was willing to be. Everyone from him to the amazing woman that does my eyelash extensions, who I had an appointment booked with right at a time that I was supposed to be doing an injection. And I have known her, by the way, for probably 5 years now. And I was like, hey, Lisa, how do you feel about injecting me? I'm going to be with you right at the time that I need to do it. It's really easy to do. I will walk you through it. I can tell you what you need to do. And she's like, yeah, no problem.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that. But the reason I brought it up is I think I had one more shot just as my little brother arrived. Little brother, I mean, he's 40.
Mhm.
Now he's 40. At the time, I guess he was 38, 39. And he did my last injection. So he also had the lucky role of being able to inject his sister in the butt. And then we went to Coney Island, and I was probably 7 or 8 weeks pregnant at the time. And I really wanted to go on some rides, but it was like, oh, I don't know. Can you? And I'm, of course, all the rides say like you can't go on the ride if you're pregnant, but frankly, that's all liability stuff.
Mhm.
So then I'm doing furious research ahead of time, trying to figure out what is actually the risk and what could happen and so on. And it really seemed like I narrowed it down to the risk being similar to if you have a car accident and have whiplash, like the risk is of a sudden force on your body that
Mhm.
could cause some kind of a I guess like a dislodgement, I suppose. But literally we're talking about a force that would be a car accident kind of force. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go on the really easy rides then. So I did go on some of the rides, and initially it was I felt completely fine. And then we went on one that wasn't a roller coaster. It was one that was like spinning you a bit. And I did not enjoy it at all. I think it's mostly that I just did not enjoy it. I was screaming blue murder on this ride. And we got off, and I was like, not doing any more rides. That did not seem advisable. No more of that. So yeah, I didn't do any more rides.
Did it make you nauseous?
Yeah, it made me nauseous. It was mostly that, honestly. I actually don't think that it was that the ride was I was intentionally like not choosing the rides, like the roller coasters that had the big sudden drops. Like I would literally, my brother and I would stand there and we would watch a ride for a few minutes to
Uh-huh.
watch the motions and decide if we felt that the motions of the ride would be acceptable.
Oh, that's funny.
I mean, one of the reasons I share this is that I think it gives some indication of the attitude that I had to pregnancy and also my, I suppose, not risk taking, but my calculations on how I do things. And I am a mix of like I research everything heavily. Emily Oster was my Bible. If anyone needs a book to
Yes.
read, I so hands down recommend the Expecting Better book by Emily Oster. And I sometimes would even go to the source studies, but I really loved the data driven approach that she had. And that informed many of my decisions.
Hmm.
And so much of it is about probabilities and weighing up of risks and making choices. And that's very personal. And
Yeah.
people will make very different choices, as they should, for what feels right to them. And I would say that my willingness to use data informed, use data to make a choice that perhaps sometimes would go against what would be in the common guidance, common, I don't quite know what to say. The reason I'm saying common is that some of it is actually more just what we say to each other, not even
Yeah.
necessarily what doctors say.
Yeah. Like the typical recommendation.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. If you're telling these women what not to do, I think it's really important that we need to know why and what is the
Why?
risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. Help me understand the risk. Like, I'll give one example again. I think I'm probably in a minority of people that made this choice. But I looked into the whole soft cheese thing,
Mhm.
and the risk is associated with listeria. And the risk is kind of simultaneously low and high. And by that, I mean the risk of incidence of a piece of cheese having listeria in it is incredibly, incredibly low. Now, I don't remember what the numbers were from the book. So this is not a quote from the book. I'm just going to say order of magnitude. Like what was kind of in my head was something like, you'd have to eat 1,000,000 pieces of cheese. So, and it may not have been that. Maybe it was like 100,000 pieces of cheese, whatever it was an amount of cheese that sounded so enormous to me that I was like, okay, this is really, this feels like an acceptable risk. But if you ended up with a piece of cheese that had listeria, the consequences are severe. So the probability is low, the consequence is high.
Mm.
And that's gonna have a bearing in your choice on that. But for me, I decided I was okay with occasionally eating some cheese and not double checking if it had been pasteurized, for example. I think a lot of people might not have made that choice. And again, I think it just comes down to how much it's about your own weighing of different situations. And something that I noticed recently, I saw a news headline about a listeria outbreak in, I think it was in some different fruits in the US. And it was a reminder to me that listeria can happen in many different food sources that it can happen in any food. And we don't eliminate all of those foods from our diet.
Yeah. White cheese.
It was just white cheese. Exactly. Yeah. White cheese. It was interesting to do that. Anyway, yes. Sorry if I digress. I strongly recommend just making the decisions that work for you and being as informed as you feel you need to be.
Yeah, that's perfect. And what about your doctor? You had your fertility doctor. How did you choose your prenatal care?
This is when actually we go into a not such great part of my experience.
Uh-oh.
The handoff from fertility to obstetrician was non-existent. And I felt absolutely abandoned by it. I had my final appointment with my fertility doctor at about 6 weeks. And I guess that was the heartbeat scan. And at that point, she basically was like, clap, clap, clap. My job's done. You're pregnant. Like, good luck. You should go make an appointment with an obstetrician. I was like, what? With who? With which obstetrician? How do I find one? When do I need to make an appointment? What happens next? Like, what? It shocked me that there wasn't more of a hands-on, or even give me a heads up sooner than that to start researching. That caught me off guard really badly. So then I scrambled to start researching doctors and get recommendations.
I could see that handoff being terrible because I am getting to that point also. My handoff is in a few weeks at 10 weeks. So I kind of get that there should be some midway point of how to do it better.
Yeah, 10 weeks makes a whole lot more sense to me, I've got to say. So I scramble, and probably at about 7 weeks, I start reaching out to doctors, and they would tell me, their offices would tell me, oh, we can see you in a few months. And I was like, what? That's not soon enough. That doesn't work. And I was staying, so I had decided, almost just for simplicity for me, to stay with NYU. That was where I had done fertility, with NYU Fertility, and really just kind of for ease of paperwork, I was like, well, let's look at NYU doctors. So finally, I just called like the main number for obstetricians at NYU, and I was like, who can see me? Who can see me first? Anyone who can see me. And they said, well, the soonest we can see you is, I think it was 11 weeks. And I was like, but that's 4 weeks from now. How do I know that everything's okay? What do I do? And part of this was to do with, I now realize, I mean, at the time, but it just would have been nice if someone had told me this. I was so used to going in like every couple of days for IVF, right? You're going in for bloods all the time. Mm-hmm. So to suddenly be told you're not being seen for 4 weeks, it really worried me. And I actually managed to get on the phone with connected somehow with a friend, someone, I can't even remember how this was. It was through a network called Maven that someone managed to get me a free trial profile on, which is like a virtual women's healthcare thing. And through that Maven network, I managed to get a virtual appointment with an obstetrician like a week later, who was, I think, actually based in Dallas. And I remember getting on the phone with this obstetrician and explaining my situation and asking what I should do and what I should check. And she was so wonderful. She made me feel so calm. She said, look, here's the thing. You are so used to being a fertility patient and going in all the time. You are now being treated just like a normal pregnant person. And actually, many people don't even need to see a doctor until around 10 or 11 weeks. You don't need to worry about anything. That's very normal for you to be seen at that point for your first prenatal. Just hearing that, like, I wish someone had told me that. It was so reassuring. She also said, look, if you're feeling really anxious about it, why don't you ask your fertility doctor if they'll see you just one more time to just go in for one more ultrasound in between. I said, okay. So I called them up and they were nice enough to say, yep, all right, come on in at I think 9 weeks. So I went in at 9 weeks and everything was fine. And that got me through to my 11-week first appointment.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helps anyone else that ends up with that. First of all, be prepared for a lack of handoff and realize that your fertility doctor is not your obstetrician. Duh me, but I didn't quite realize that. And that it's also okay if there's suddenly a big gap in time. And if anything, take that as a really positive sign that you're good. That first appointment, she was awful.
Oh, no.
Yeah, awful enough that I then had to go back into basically the NYU main coordinator and said, please make a note on my file. I never want to see that doctor again.
Oh, no. What was so bad about it?
She was so cold. Her manner was so cold and so condescending. And she didn't listen at any point. There were plenty of things that were either in my file or that I had said at the beginning of the appointment that she then asked me about. And I was like, what? She said something about, well, we may want to be doing some testing, especially as your IVF at your age, the genetic testing, that sort of screening, which I wanted to do anyway. But I was like, but I already told you I did embryo testing. The embryo that was implanted was already tested. Mm-hmm. Presumably that gives me a much greater chance of everything being fine. She's like, oh, well, yes, that's right. That's right. It's like, yeah, okay. So you just hadn't listened to that part. She also got really snippety with me about my multivitamins. I was taking a prenatal and also taking a whole host of other vitamins. And actually, this is my naivety. I thought that the prenatal was something that you had to take in addition to whatever else if you were pregnant. I didn't realize that the prenatal actually can encompass all of the vitamins that you need to take. It's basically like a multivitamin, but tailored for pregnancy. I didn't realize that. I thought it was a special extra thing that I had to take. So basically I was taking probably more than I needed, but none of it was harmful. And she was just so mean about it. She really made me feel stupid. Ugh. So yeah, I did not want to see her again.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I did not see her again. So that was good.
So how did you find your doctor?
Yeah, I mean, again, this, I guess, because I was in the NYU system, up until 8 months pregnant, I saw a different doctor every visit.
Oh, how was that?
So it was not good. It was not good. At no point did I feel that I had anyone that was truly caring for me. I felt pretty alone in that process, I will say. In fact, the most care that I felt I received was when I was on holiday in France for a couple of months over the summer. Holiday, that's not correct. I was working from there, but took holiday in that time as well. And it was during the time of my 20-week scan. So I had scheduled to have it done with a doctor in France, and they were amazing. And it felt really personal, even to the point that often in the US, the person that does your scan is separate. It's a technician that does the scan, but then doesn't tell you anything during the scan. And then you have the doctor see you separately. At least that's how it was for me with NYU. Whereas in France, it was actually a very small clinic in a very small town, kind of in the countryside. And the doctor did the scan, and my mom was in the room with me, which was really nice. And he spent half an hour with me, showing me everything about the baby.
Nice.
It was really nice. Yeah, it was quite a stark contrast.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, it cost me almost nothing. It was $100 out of pocket,
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay. Was there any product that helped you during pregnancy that you could recommend?
The nausea and the burping, I mean, all the classic things that help with motion sickness help. And I actually struggle with motion sickness. So in that regard, I was at least reasonably well equipped. I also knew burping always helped me. So I wasn't surprised that the burping happened. But ginger chews, ginger ale. I use the pressure point wristbands. So it's like an acupressure technique where you can just buy these from Walgreens and you wear it. It's kind of like an elastic band with a little nodule in it, and you wear them on your wrists, and it applies pressure to a pressure point that can help alleviate nausea. So that was, I found, and I've used that before for motion sickness. So I would recommend those things as well. Perhaps we could come on to me having COVID during pregnancy.
Okay.
Which was actually a bit of a scare and was probably the hardest part of my pregnancy. So this also happened when I was away in those few months. And I had scheduled a work trip to London, and I was already not doing very well, but it wasn't COVID. I had some sinus issues, some congestion that had actually then, unfortunately, it developed into bronchitis. So I had bronchitis. I was coughing up some not very nice stuff. Get to London, go and see a specialist who said, yeah, you've got bronchitis, and gave me some antibiotics, which is also, taking anything in pregnancy is scary. And you're like, well, which ones are okay? And so he had to prescribe me, basically amoxicillin is the one that they will typically prescribe if you're pregnant, because it's the one that's has the most data on it. Mm-hmm. So that was what I was prescribed. But even then, I mean, you'd rather take nothing, but you're weighing up. Again, this is just weighing up having bronchitis and treating that, which could in itself become a bigger issue, versus the antibiotics. So I got given the antibiotics. By the way, actually, another brief pause. It did shock me somewhat, the extent to which, this was actually more in France, where I went to see a doctor initially about me not feeling well. This was before I saw the specialist in London. And they really seemed only to care about the baby and not about me. Like, all of the checks were, is the baby fine? And the baby was fine. But no one seemed to care how I felt.
Really?
Yeah, it was a little bit odd, like that feeling of, okay, I mean, obviously I care also a lot about how my baby is doing, but can my well-being not be subsidiary? Like, me being well is also important.
How bizarre.
Yeah, it was really strange. It was strange. Yeah. But in London it wasn't like that. Thankfully they definitely were treating, I was the patient rather than the baby being the patient, which was like as it should be. Mm-hmm. So I get these antibiotics and start feeling better. About 3 days later, I'm feeling well enough that I go into the office. And that day in the office, I started, right at the end of the day, I was feeling quite hot. And it's crazy how quickly it hit, how quickly that fever came on. And I went back to the place I was staying, took my temperature, and it was sky high. And I then did a COVID test, and it was like a virulent incline. Like, oh, if those tests mean anything about degrees of COVID, I was very COVID. So I honestly started to panic a little bit, mostly because of the fever, because I was just so hot. Mm-hmm. And this is again where I hate to say it, but NYU's system let me down. I'm trying to call them from overseas to say, like, do I need to be worried about this? What should I be doing? And I just kept getting routed to a switchboard, because it was, I think, maybe not in the office hours or something. I don't know, but they were not, no one was taking my call, and they were basically totally unhelpful. They just said, figure it out effectively. So not good. A friend came over. I got naked and she ran me an ice bath, and I was in that bath. And finally, first thing the next morning, my fever had still not come down. So we went to the ER, University College London, and they were wonderful. They saw me really quickly with no questions asked, and got me hooked up to an IV, and were basically more just monitoring me. I was there for a day for them to just see how I did. And the fever abated in that time. And while it took me another 2 weeks to really be better, the kind of the feeling of crisis was over. And I basically went back to where I was staying in London and quarantined until I was better again. But with that and the bronchitis, I had a month of not being well. And the reason I bring this up was, Jamie, when you asked me about what I had taken, it's super hard when you're sick and you're pregnant. So antibiotics aside, for COVID, antibiotics don't help. They help the bronchitis. That was a bacterial infection. But what can you take to help the symptoms of a cold and flu virus? Not that much.
Yeah.
It's tough. Tylenol is considered one of the safer things. Again, I went through my Emily Oster book as well as doing a lot of my own online research. So I would take Tylenol, but not decongestants. I did find, again, after consulting, and I consulted actually with a fair few doctors on this, that I could take some cough medicine, so some things to help basically loosen what was on my chest so that I could get it up. In the UK, it's called Robitussin. I think in the US, it might be Mucinex, or at least that might be one of the brand names. And there are some quantities of that are considered safe to take. Again, when I say safe, it's more when you are trading off the being sick versus not being sick. It's not like you would take it unless it was necessary and for a short period of time.
Right.
So it was tough. Yeah, it was tough.
That sounds like a tough month.
We got through it. It was a tough month. And I was alone. I was alone in London. God.
Jeez.
Yeah.
How far along were you then?
So I'd had the 20-week scan, and then this happened probably a month later. I would have been about 25 weeks.
Wow.
But the baby was fine. At no point were there any issues with the baby, which was
thank goodness.
Great. Thank goodness. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how did you prepare for your daughter?
Not very well prepared. I ended up moving house at 9 months pregnant. So that was great. I just felt like I had the mental load and the administrative load was so heavy with me trying to find somewhere to live, and also thinking through getting a baby nurse and interviewing baby nurses, and do I need a doula, and interviewing doulas. Kind of like just each thing in its time, but the focus on all of those things, which seemed like it seems reasonable that the most important things I was solving for was the right place to live, doula, baby nurse. And I needed to solve those three things before I could start worrying about baby clothes. So I was in a WhatsApp group with other women that were due around the same time as me. And they're all like in the chat about things like, so I'm thinking about my book collection for the baby. And I wondered, let's crowdsource. What books are you all buying? And I say this, they're my friends, and I'm not by any means being mean about it. More that I was so not there, and I was a little bit jealous that they were at a point of prep where they could do that. Or another friend who was like, so I'm basically like designing the nursery. I've got a Pinterest board with all of the ideas I have and the color schemes. How are you thinking about designing your nursery? And I was like, I don't have anywhere to live yet. There's no nursery. So, yeah, I suppose what you could take this as is a lesson of you can do an awful lot in the final couple of weeks, and Amazon is great. So, yeah.
Did you end up taking any classes?
I did. I actually signed up for a hypnobirthing course.
Tell us more.
So I was intrigued by the concept. I bought a hypnobirthing book as well, and I'd say I probably got more from the book than I did from the class. And again, so much of this is style and preference, as with everything, but so much with pregnancy, I think, and childbirth. I would say I'm squarely in the middle of the extremes, where I would say one extreme would be the full natural. When I say natural, I mean like non-medicated, non-medicalized birth, where so you're not taking anything for the pain, at home birth. That's sort of one end of the spectrum, I would say. And then the other end would be I suppose maybe a planned C-section, but something that's a much more hospitalized, medicalized type of environment and set of choices. And nothing wrong with any of those choices. And there's a whole spectrum from one end to the other. And I think I'm squarely in the middle, where I wasn't wanting to do a home birth. I was very open to having pain management, but also intrigued by what I could do on my own, and by whether or not I could manage the pain enough not need it, and therefore be able to have the control of my body and the sensations and feel it. Like that appealed to me also.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of where, me being in the middle, very open to the idea of it and more curious to see how I could manage without it. Certainly some of the things that I'd read made me interested in the possibility of not having an epidural if I could.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the idea of being able to have full control of my body. I didn't like the idea of being made to stay on the bed,
Mm-hmm.
which you have to if you have the epidural. So that was probably the main thing that appealed to me of not having the epidural, just having the freedom of movement. I am a very active person. I'm also very, I would say, aware and in my body in a lot of ways. I actually teach yoga in my spare time. I haven't since having the baby, but I used to. And my yoga practice is incredibly important to me. We didn't talk about this. I did a lot of Pilates during my pregnancy, which was amazing and really helped me also be incredibly aware of, I suppose, my pelvis and the movements and control and relaxation there. And all of that made me really want to, if possible, be able to have that movement during labor for as long as I could handle it. So that's where I was very open to it. But also what I didn't want was to be in an environment where it wasn't an option to have an epidural. So for me, at least, that ruled out home birth and that ruled out birthing. I think they're called like birthing centers. I can't, but places that are a little bit more holistic in nature, but they're not hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
So that was why I signed up for the hypnobirthing course. So I could just really continue to educate myself as much as possible about really actually what was happening during labor. And that was what I would say I learned the most during hypnobirthing. It was just even understanding the way in which your uterus is structured, the way in which the muscle fibers work, that you have a whole series of bands, horizontal muscle bands around the uterus that are heaviest at the bottom of the uterus. If you picture the uterus like a big coconut, the bottom of the coconut, there are lots of horizontal bands. Like think of elastic bands wrapping around the coconut up to the halfway point. Then there's a whole bunch of vertical ones going lengthways along the coconut. And what you need when you're in labor to open is for the horizontal ones at the bottom to relax and open, and for the ones at the top to tighten and pull up to pull it open. Even just understanding that's what's happening when you contract. That was amazing to me wait. And then being able to visualize that. So much of the hypnobirthing was about visualizing as you breathe, how do you feel that wave in your body? How do you control your movement with your breath? There's so much about your breathing. And that was really what I would say I mostly took away, not so much from the course, almost was, it pointed me in the right directions for my further research. I would say the person running the course was not style-wise suited to me. She was, for me, a little too on the, call it kind of the end of the spectrum of the almost advocate, like encouraging not to have pain relief, for example. Like she was very much at one end of where her preferences were, and that wasn't right for me, but I still took quite a lot of knowledge from it.
Now, did they want to induce you?
They did. We had quite a disagreement on that one.
Oh, tell us more.
So they wanted to induce me by about 39 weeks. And this is, I think, fairly standard protocol. I mean, I think, first of all, for any pregnancy, they're generally encouraging that, at least in the US they are.
Yeah.
But certainly for over 40, they do encourage induction ahead of the due date. I was feeling just fine. I was, aside from the time when I was sick, I had a pretty easy pregnancy. I felt pretty comfortable. I was very mobile. I didn't have much weight gain. I could move easily. I was doing well. The baby was doing well. I was also, by the way, mid-moving house and really needed that baby to not come out yet. So I saw no reason to be induced. So I basically just kept saying, no, Give me, like, am I doing fine? Yes. Is the baby fine? Yes. Then I don't want to be induced. Now, I say that there is reason why they don't just suggest for over 40s to be induced early for no reason. There is some data that suggests some worsening of outcomes specifically for that age group as you get past the due date. And it is different from people that are younger, but not a very large amount different. And very hard to separate out all of the other things that correlate with being older. So that was where I was struggling with the fact that I was in really good shape and good health, and the baby was doing well. So I really didn't want it. I really wanted her to come out when she was ready to come out. Mm-hmm. And again, everyone's going to feel differently about that. Like, I had a friend who was due the day before me, and she was like, I am so over this. Get this baby out. I think she induced at maybe 38 weeks. So even though our babies were actually due at the same time, I actually ended up 8 days after my due date. So they've ended up being nearly a month apart.
Wow.
Yeah. So I basically held on as long as I could. And they told me our policy at NYU is that you must be induced by 10 days after your due date. Now, this is where my doula was very helpful, because they put pressure on from 38 weeks or so to schedule an induction. And my doula was the one that kept reminding me, Tara, they cannot force you. They literally cannot force you. This is your choice. It is your body. So even if you schedule an induction, if you don't show up, they can't make you. So just remember that. And she wasn't saying that to encourage me one way or another, just to empower me, just for me to not feel pushed around by a system that can make it sound like what they're saying is a command when it is not a command. Mm-hmm. And I valued that a lot. And so what ended up happening, I did schedule one for 8 days past my due date. And I hadn't yet decided what I was going to do. Was I going to show up or not? But it was scheduled. A couple of days ahead of that, I had a membrane sweep, which is an induction method where they put like a finger kind of into the mouth of the cervix and basically like scoop it around in a circle. And they're breaking some of the membranes that attach the sac that the baby is in to the bottom of your uterus. That can trigger some hormone release that basically is like hacking your body into thinking that the baby is dropping and that you're getting ready. It can be a way of getting labor started. So it's considered a fairly mild induction method, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I went in and had that done, and my mucus plug came out during the membrane sweep. So I get up from the table, put my clothes back on, and well, there was a little package there on the table. I was like, oh, what is that? Blob. And the doctor like peers around the curtain and was like, oh, your mucus plug came out. And that seemed like pretty good indicator that things were starting to move. And in general, I started to just feel some different things in my body in those days between the membrane sweep and my scheduled induction. Now, I did not go into labor ahead of my induction, but I did feel that my body was getting ready. And so I felt much more comfortable going in for the scheduled induction because I thought I was close to ready. And I thought I would probably be relatively receptive to the induction, which my body was. So that was good. So in the end, it worked out. I in some ways, I guess, kind of got what I...
Yeah, you were 8 days past your due date. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's quite common for first pregnancies, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know in France, they count the due date as a week longer than we do in the US?
Really?
They count pregnancy as 41 weeks, not 40 weeks. So I would have been considered a day past my due date in France, which is different in how you think about it psychologically.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, how did your induction go?
Well, it was effective, but long, as inductions often are. I ended up in labor for 26 hours.
Ooh.
It's, and I know there are many that have worse stories than that, but it's a long time. They started with the Foley balloon method. They basically put a uninflated balloon into the bottom of up through your cervix and then inflate it. And it acts as a weight on the bottom of your cervix that is simulating the baby's head dropping. And again, can start to get the cervix dilated, get things moving. And I was quite responsive to that. So after a certain number of hours of the Foley balloon being in, the balloon basically falls out by itself. And it falls out because you have dilated enough that it will fall out. So that was good. That was effective.
Did you find it painful?
I did not.
Oh, I've heard it's really painful. That's good.
Yeah. Again, I think these things are just so variable, aren't they, as to how you experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't, it was uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable, but not painful.
Okay.
And when I would say uncomfortable, it was the being put in that was uncomfortable. But then it wasn't. Well, I'll tell you what started to be uncomfortable, though. It wasn't the Foley balloon. It was the contractions that started once the Foley balloon got put in. And holy moly, wow. I was not prepared for that. I don't know that anything, none of the courses I did, none of the books I read, I don't know that anything can prepare you for a sensation you've never had before.
Mm-hmm.
But I was having what they called contraction storms, where you contract and basically don't have more than a split second of coming down from the contraction before you go straight into another contraction. And that's really hard when you don't have a moment to breathe, a moment of respite, just again. And they had me hooked up to so I had a portable monitor on so I could move around. And so like a waistband thing around my waist that was monitoring things, and it's monitoring the contractions. I have no idea how the technology works. It's very cool. But there's a computer screen that basically shows a line that goes up and makes like a mountain on the screen when you're in a contraction, and then comes back down when you're not in a contraction. And I would just watch that screen, because in some ways it was validating to me to see when I had a contraction, to see the line going up, and the higher the line went, like the more intense the contraction. And you could see that I didn't come back down very much. I would like dip a tiny bit and then go straight back up again. And somehow I did find that validating. And I was there with my mom and with my doula. And there was a point where the machine had a lag. So I was feeling the contraction, but it wasn't spiking on the screen. And I was screaming at the screen, like, the machine has a lag. It has a lag. I'm contracting right now. So that was something. And I made it until, how long did I make it? I made it until it was probably about 1 or 2 in the morning. And I was admitted around 5 p.m. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 8 hours until I was like, okay, let's get that epidural. Yeah. The epidural. This was then also an adventure, Jamie. So first of all, the anesthesiologists were busy with some other patients, and they took 40 minutes to get to me.
A long 40 minutes.
That is a long 40 minutes, because the point at which I decided I needed the epidural was basically when I was like, I need it right now. Yeah, it was 40 minutes. Oh my God. Then they finally come in, and I have to say, like, I don't know why this seemed funny to me, but it still seems funny to me. The main, what do they call it? The lead person, the attending physician, I guess that's like the senior one. And then the resident was the junior one. So the attending, his scrubs were sleeveless. You could see his somewhat muscled arms.
Oh my gosh.
Which I just found quite funny, especially because they were quite muscled. And even in my like racking contractions, I so nearly said, dude, do you even lift, bro? Like, I really wanted to make some comments, like, and also be like, hey, I'm single, just so you know. I didn't. Mostly just because I was like, don't distract him from his job. Don't distract him from his job. They get the epidural in. It did take a couple of tries, unfortunately, and you have to stay still while they're doing it, which is really hard when you're going through contractions. They get the epidural in, and I feel some immediate relief. And then they said, we're going to leave you for the night, and hopefully this helps you get some sleep. we'll come back in the morning. They've got a little button that you can press whenever you feel like you basically pressing the button would release more of the whatever the drug is in the epidural into your system. Great. Okay. I'm hooked up. And that was a long night and a rough night. And the pain was tough. And I would say I did not sleep very much. And when the nurse finally comes in the morning, I asked her, could you please increase the epidural? Like, are there dosages to this? I think we can maybe increase the amount because this is rough. And she said, well, have you been pressing the button? And I said, yeah, I've been pressing the button. I pretty much hold my finger on the button so that I get it whenever I'm allowed to get it. She's like, okay. She goes to the machine and there's a very awkward silence.
Uh-oh.
And she kind of gulps and says, the pump's not hooked up. You haven't been getting any epidural. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. How angry were you?
I mean, do you know, in the end, again, in hindsight, like, it was like, well, I said I wanted to try and do it as long as I could without an epidural. So I did it a whole lot longer than I thought.
Wow.
And I did get that first hit of it, like basically because when they first hooked me up, there was like an initial dose. It's just that then the pump never gave me any more. So like that dose wore off and then I wasn't getting any. It also shows how powerful the placebo effect is because even though it was rough, I definitely thought I was getting something when I pressed that button.
Uh-huh.
So it was just interesting to me psychologically. So at this point, we're actually like, I'm now probably a 20-ish out, like I'm pretty far into the labor at this point. And my waters broke and they broke naturally. And that was kind of an amazing moment when suddenly it's like, whoa, what's happening? What's happening? Oh, my waters are breaking. And they wouldn't check my cervix. And I went through what we thought was, they call it transition, which is the stage of labor when you hit 10 centimeters dilated. And it's a short stage. It's a very intense stage. And my doula, who was with me for the whole labor and has experience, she was fairly sure I was going through transition because I threw up. And it's quite common during transition that your body is basically kind of letting go of everything. And I started to also feel a strong sensation of wanting to poo. And that also strongly indicates that baby has descended. Like you are getting pressure down there that is making you feel like you need to poop, but actually you don't. You've just got a baby coming out. And they wouldn't check my cervix until 12 hours after my water had broken because they're concerned. I mean, it's for good reason, but they're concerned about introducing any infection at that point. So they really want to limit what they're doing. But my intuition, my feeling in my body and the doula, all of us were saying, the baby has dropped and I'm dilated. Like, please check. And I kept asking them and they held me to the 12 hours. So I think my waters broke at 6 a.m. and they did not check me again until 6 p.m. They checked me finally and it was an immediate, oh, she's at 10 centimeters. I can see the head. Let's go, people. She's ready to push. Let's go. I mean, it was like sirens suddenly. Woo, 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 woo. Let's go. Action stations. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I knew that. Could have told you that. The good news, actually, I would say, is that all of that time, I had been moving the baby down. Like, I was still laboring, right? I was getting her further and further down in all of that time. And because they gave me that epidural so late in the process, I never lost movement in my legs. I never lost my ability to be able to hold myself up with my legs. So although they would not let me off the bed, I still had a good degree of movement. And I had been on all fours for a while. The doula did all sorts of great movements for me with my hips. We just kept moving me around. I would squat on the bed because as long as I stayed on the bed, it was okay. And I really, truly think a lot of that helped the labor progress, which is partly why when they finally checked, it was like, yeah, she's like really close. So they then get all the stuff ready. Like they weren't ready. And then finally, when they were ready for me to actually start pushing, this is where, again, if I had a do-over, Jamie, if I'm pregnant again, if I labor again, this part I will do differently. I would say I let them kind of push me around in this moment.
Mm.
And they really wanted me to labor on my back using their breath counting, where they count, and on their counting, they make you hold your breath. And while you're holding for a count of 10, you're supposed to push. And then you breathe. And then you like inhale, and then you like breathe a little bit. Like, and they're counting while you're holding your breath and pushing. It's actually called, if anyone wants to look it up, it's called purple pushing. And it's quite, I guess, counter to hypnobirthing. It's not at all the idea of relaxing and letting the muscles open and breathing the baby out. It's like forcing the baby out. And it's not what it's effective. It worked for me, but it just wasn't what I wanted to do. That wasn't what I'd practiced. And yet when you've got 4 people around you, like going, count and hold your breath and push, and you're like, whoa. And I really didn't want to be on my back. I wanted to be in a different position. And so I asked, and they really didn't want me to. And I insisted, and I managed. They brought this bar over me that I could hold on to. And I got up into a squatting position. And I did manage like that for like one round of pushing. But it was hard. I mean, the epidural was still in my system. It was hard for me to be in that position. So I end up back on my back. So this is when I definitely dropped an F-bomb at this moment, because I'm doing the counting, but their counting was off with my breath. It's like, I know my breath. I can count my breath. I do not need you counting for me on my breath. And so I finally said, stop fucking counting. I can do my own counting. She's got it. Honestly, at a point where I was like, I just needed the baby out. I remember looking at my doula at one moment and saying, I don't know if I can do this. And she just looked me in the eyes and she said, Tara, you really didn't want a C-section. You have avoided it to this point. The only way this baby comes out now is through you pushing. You've got to get this baby out. And I was like, okay, then let's push. And I pushed with all my might, and they were astonished at the progress. And it was kind of reassuring, I guess, to hear with each push, my pushes were effective, and more of the baby would come out, and more of the baby would come out. And it was very fast. It was maybe 45 minutes total from beginning pushing to the baby was out. And then the baby came out, got plopped on me. I remember I needed a couple of stitches. I had some tearing, not super severe, but some. And as they were stitching me, again, lack of epidural having really hit to full effect, I was like, I can feel those stitches. And they got some local anesthetic in me down there, pronto. Great. That helped a lot. Yeah. And then it was kind of a blur, honestly. It was like, there's this thing on me now. What the fuck? What do I do? I mean, it was just crazy. And within 5 minutes of her being born, my dad was in the room. My brother was in the room. They tag teamed out with my mom and the doula. So they were there. My brother burst into tears.
So
sweet. It was very emotional. Yeah, it was quite the family moment.
Yeah, that's cute. Now, about your doula, how was she helpful?
She was amazing. I mean, not only in the prep, which I talked about with you already a little bit, like in her just making me feel very empowered. She very much supported whatever choices I made. And if I wanted to go down a path of hypnobirthing and no epidural, she would support that. And if I wanted to go down an epidural, she supported that. And she was there with me the whole time. She really just helped me understand also what was happening. You're actually in that hospital room for a long time without any nurses in there. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have someone there telling you what the machines mean and what to expect and what's going on. And we set up my room. I had a Starry Night projector and we had a playlist going. It was a vibe. And the doctors and nurses would come in there and be like, wow, we just want to stay in this room.
That sounds really nice. It
was really nice. I mean, I highly recommend people to do that. Like you can kind of make it your own. Yeah. So yes, she was an emotional support and also an advocate and an educator for me.
That's great. And how was your recovery?
Good. It was really good. Yeah. I think a lot due to me having been in pretty good shape up until labor. All the Pilates that I did, I really think that stood me in good stead. And as soon as I was able to, I started doing, the most incredibly gentle Pilates postpartum. It would seem like nothing to someone that's not pregnant, but it's just almost mindful breathing, just very mindful movements of your body, very, very gentle, getting back into things. Yeah, I recovered well and quickly, although I will say I did not look down there for quite some time. It was just kind of like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what it looks like anymore. What if it's totally changed? Not looking, not looking. And you can feel the stitches, and it's like I was like, I not looking until don't feel those things anymore. I will say, pro tip, getting one of those bidets that you can just attach to your toilet seat. It was amazing to have a little bit of warm water and not have to wipe anything.
That's a good idea.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can do that with just like a spray bottle as well. You don't need the bidet, but the bidet meant it was warm, and that was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so my recovery was good. Yeah.
Mentally, how were you?
Also pretty good. The bit that was the hardest for me was actually breastfeeding, and the milk coming in and all of that. Breastfeeding was became a very difficult thing for me. It was a very tough part of my first few months, but it was a very tough part of the first few weeks. And it's stressful. I felt a lot of pressure on when's the milk coming? When's the milk coming? And you're worrying about that at the same time as like you're hurting down there and it hurts to sit, and like your boobs are like, you didn't think they could get any bigger, but they get bigger. And you don't want anyone to touch you because even hugs, you're like, ow, like it's just kind of crazy what's happening in your body. But I did have a baby nurse, and that helped so much with me being able to get some stretches of sleep. Mm-hmm. Of course, I'm still up in the night, but definitely more sleep than I would have got otherwise. And also being able to sometimes sleep during the day. It's a luxury and a privilege to be able to pay for it, because they don't come cheap. But if you are able to, or even something maybe you could put on a baby registry, ask people to contribute. You could totally be like, hey, ask for, like, maybe people could buy a night of a baby nurse for you. It's incredibly helpful, not just for you being able to get rest, but this is someone, typically, I will say, like, caveat all of this with, nurse is not a medical qualification. They're called this casually. It does not denote a qualification, and there's going to be a whole range of experience. So just a kind of heads up on that, like, be careful and thoughtful in how you navigate a totally unregulated field. Mm-hmm. But in my instance, and I think for many people, this was someone with a huge amount of experience. She actually was a former pediatric nurse, and she taught me so much. She taught me so much about just how to change a diaper and like what to look for and how to hold the baby, and was an emotional support to me as well with the breastfeeding. So that helped me so much in my recovery. And it's also linked, right? Me being able to sleep some changed very much how I recovered.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet that did help.
Yeah. Yeah, all in all, it was an incredibly positive experience. And I would say the bit where, everyone's going to have the thing that's their hard thing, mm-hmm. breastfeeding became my hard thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after pregnancy.
Well, is there anything else you want to add to your birth or pregnancy?
Maybe just that, at least for me, I think that there is both a virtuous cycle and a vicious cycle of staying active or not being active. And that sometimes I think we can treat pregnant people almost with too much gentleness. Like, not gentleness isn't the right word. You want to be gentle, of course. What's the right word? As if they're like not capable. I was very capable, and there was a lot that I could still do. And I didn't want to be treated like an invalid. And I think that we can sometimes almost cotton wrap people too much. And that's where I think it can become both a vicious or a virtuous cycle. I think by virtue of me just continuing to be so active, that really helped me. It helped me in my recovery. It helped me in my labor. And I think probably the opposite is true. And sometimes women don't have a choice, right? Of course, sometimes there could be medical conditions that necessitate you, for example, being on your bed for a long time in the later stages of pregnancy. But I think that actually can accentuate other issues. Emily Oster's book talks somewhat about this as well, that the whole bed rest is actually a fairly now outdated concept. Mm-hmm. And I did find pretty big variations between doctors based on the age of the doctor and sort of to what extent they had kept up with maybe some more modern views and modern approaches. Mm-hmm. Again, I will caveat the same caveat I made the whole time, that this is always personal choice, but that I would just be maybe get a second opinion, or maybe just ask a few questions if you're being treated in a way that just feels like you're not capable, because you are.
Yeah, definitely. What are you going to do with your little male embryo?
Great question. Oh, this is where the being a single mother is tough. I would so want another baby. Mm-hmm. I would like to do this again. I would really like my baby to have a sibling. I don't think I can do it on my own. Having one on my own is already a lot. And I am very happy with the sacrifices I am making. But for example, traveling on my own with her, I traveled to the Bahamas on my own with her. It was a 10-hour trip. It was hard. I don't think I could do that if I had been with her and with a toddler. I literally don't think that's possible. Mm-hmm. I don't think that I could safely do that. I don't know how I would. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that I am willing to sacrifice that much more again. If I had another, I think it would mean we wouldn't be able to go places for a number of years. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I'd see my family otherwise. So yeah, I mean, my dream, Jamie, if any listeners know anyone eligible who would like to meet a great single mama in Brooklyn, New York City, and wants to have a baby, if I met someone, I would love to have a second child with a partner.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And there is time. There's time still.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest challenge being pregnant in your 40s?
The limitations, probably the limitations for me that were the most significant were alcohol. As far as the difference from my normal lifestyle, mm-hmm. and the maybe one of the changes that I felt important that I make. So in my research, so I didn't stop drinking entirely. I stopped for the first trimester, so I didn't have anything for the first 12 weeks. Then for the second trimester, I would let myself have a small glass of wine, maybe once or twice a week with a meal, drunk slowly. Third trimester, probably similar, but the research I did told me if I had wanted to do a bit more than that, I could. More being probably more the frequency and not more the quantity in a given setting. Mm-hmm. Although I actually don't think I really did. But that was my life is like my family, quite socially. We had a glass of wine or two with dinner. That's quite normal behavior. So that was hard, engaging in social circles, going out for drinks, going out for dinners, going to a Halloween party and not having a drink, not getting to have a cocktail, having only half a glass of wine. I missed it. I mean, it was also totally fine, but that was probably one of the bigger changes. And then towards the end of pregnancy, the limitations to my yoga practice, I missed it. Yeah, I missed the movement. Yeah. But these are such minor things.
In the scheme of it, for sure.
In the scheme of you're carrying a life, and it's such an extraordinary thing that our bodies do. I was in awe. Honestly, going through labor as well, I was, maybe this is a nice note to end on. I was in awe of women. It makes me emotional thinking about it. Not just birthing women, not just women that birth vaginally, not just women that have children, all women. The way that my mom was there to support me, the way my doula was there to support me, the understanding and community of women around me and what women endure and can do. I was just utterly in awe. I think women are amazing.
That's right. I love that.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd recommend that would help prepare someone for pregnancy and birth over 40?
Trust your body and what you know is right for you and being healthy for you. Don't let the medical establishment and calling you a geriatric pregnancy make you scared.
Mm-hmm.
It's just medical terminology. It literally just means the age that you are. It doesn't mean anything else.
Perfect. And what advice would you give yourself when you were pregnant if you could go back?
Oh, such a good question. Do you know, I really feel good about all the choices I made and how I navigated them. Okay. Maybe it would have been to just chill out even more. Like to know that it was going to be okay. Like some of the moments of panic I had with COVID, but it's always impossible, right? In the moment.
I love that.
I expect that's normal for second pregnancy. So,
And where can we connect with you?
So Instagram is the best place. I share very openly about my journeys. I posted pictures of my labor. You can even see my placenta should you wish.
Ooh.
Yep. I document everything and share so openly because I want this path of having a child on your own to be one that feels possible, but also not just the being single. Like I posted so much about breastfeeding and what was hard about breastfeeding. That post got 300 comments, I think.
Wow.
Because it was like I tapped into this feeling amongst so many women of being recognized, of it's this romanticized thing that's actually really hard. And it was nice that someone acknowledged that it's really hard. So that's just to say, I share the bad as well as the good. And my Instagram handle is Starra Tales, STARRA, 2 R's, and then Tales, like fairy tales, TALES, Starra Tales.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Monday.
I'm just checking if we've frozen again.
I don't think so. Oh, you have a little bit, but I can still hear you.
As long as you've got my audio. Okay.
Yeah.
So apologies to everyone if this is making it glitchy. I'm sorry. Blame the Bahamas. And you've just cut out again. So maybe this is our signal that it's time to go.